Have you ever wondered why, despite constantly striving for approval and recognition, something still feels missing inside? We spend so much of our time seeking validation from others, yet it seems to always slip through our fingers. The more we chase after it, the emptier we feel. Why is that? Michel de Montaigne, the French philosopher from the 16th century, had an answer that might surprise you. The more you seek approval, the less fulfilled you become. But the moment you let go of this need, something magical happens. Life begins to align itself in ways you never expected. Montaigne's insight is paradoxical yet profound. In the act of not caring about what others think, we may actually unlock the most genuine version of ourselves. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you found yourself altering your behavior to please someone, to fit in, or to meet an expectation that wasn't even yours? In a world that encourages constant validation, we often feel like we have to prove our worth to others. Yet, this pursuit of approval leaves us drained and disconnected from who we truly are. Montaigne's message was simple, yet radical. If we stop caring about external validation, we might just find ourselves living more authentically and freely. Now, let's take a deeper dive into Montaigne's timeless philosophy. We're going to explore how the desire for approval shapes our behavior, not just in our everyday lives, but also from a psychological standpoint. We'll draw from the fields of social psychology, neuroscience, and psychoanalysis to uncover why Montaigne's thoughts are still relevant today, even in our modern world filled with social media and constant scrutiny. Are you ready to explore how not caring can be the ultimate form of personal liberation? The disease of approval seeking. In today's digital age, the hunger for approval is more pervasive than ever. Social media has made seeking validation a daily, almost addictive activity. We constantly check for likes, comments, or any form of acknowledgement from others. But have you ever stopped to think about the true psychological toll of this behavior? From a psychological perspective, approval seeking is a behavior rooted in social validation. We're wired to want recognition from others because it reinforces our sense of self-worth. It's part of our social nature as humans, designed for survival within a group. However, when this need for approval becomes excessive, it can start to control our actions, and worse, it can lead us to feel empty despite all the external praise we receive. Stanley Milgram's famous obedience experiments shed light on how deep this need for validation runs. In his studies, Milgram showed that people were often willing to follow authority figures' orders, even if it meant causing harm to others. This compliance, driven by the desire to conform, is a powerful testament to how far we'll go to gain approval or avoid disapproval. The same psychological principle operates on social media today. We might not harm others, but we often sacrifice our authenticity to gain likes or followers. This need for approval is not just a harmless quirk, it's a trap. Susan Forward's book Emotional Blackmail takes this concept further by exploring how our need for validation can be exploited in relationships. She explains how approval seeking can be weaponized by others to manipulate and control us. This is a prime example of what we call dark psychology, the manipulation of others for personal gain. When we are desperate for approval, we become vulnerable to guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and subtle threats. We allow ourselves to be controlled because we want to feel accepted. Milgram once said, "We are dangerously prone to believe anything that flatters us." When we seek approval, we often stop questioning the motivations behind the compliments and validation we receive. We may begin to mold ourselves into someone we're not, just to meet others' expectations. This can warp our sense of self, causing us to lose touch with who we really are and what we truly value. The takeaway here is powerful. Approval seeking isn't just about wanting a pat on the back. It's a behavioral trap that compromises our emotional autonomy and opens us up to manipulation. The more we seek validation from others, the less we become in tune with our authentic selves. The illusion of external validation. So, what makes external validation so appealing, and why do we keep chasing it even though it never seems to last? According to cognitive psychology, it all comes down to how our brains are wired to seek rewards. When we receive praise or recognition, our brain's reward centers light up, releasing dopamine, the feel-good chemical. This creates a fleeting sense of happiness, but it's just that, fleeting. The momentary high we get from external validation quickly fades, leaving us wanting more. It's a vicious cycle. The more validation we get, the more we crave. And when we don't get it, we feel empty or even anxious. This is where cognitive biases like the spotlight effect come into play. We tend to overestimate how much others are focused on us, which intensifies our need for external validation. In reality, most people are far more concerned with themselves than they are with us, yet we still believe that their approval is what will make us whole. Ernest Becker, in his groundbreaking work The Denial of Death, offers a profound insight into why we seek external validation. Becker argues that as humans, we are constantly trying to distract ourselves from our existential fears, the fear of our own mortality, the fear of being insignificant. We seek validation as a way of proving that we matter, that we exist in the eyes of others. Fame, approval, and admiration act as temporary shields against these existential fears. Becker's words, "Man cannot endure his own littleness unless he can translate it into meaningfulness," reveal the psychological mechanism behind our validation-seeking behavior. The more we cling to external approval, the more we avoid confronting the reality of our own vulnerability. But Montaigne's philosophy offers a different way, a way of letting go of this need and embracing life without the constant search for meaning through others. By recognizing the neurological and existential drivers behind our hunger for validation, we can begin to free ourselves from its grip. It's a process of acknowledging that external validation can never provide the lasting sense of fulfillment we crave. The real shift comes when we start to look inward for validation, when we find contentment in ourselves rather than in the approval of others. Detachment versus indifference. When we talk about detachment in Montaigne's philosophy, it's crucial to understand that detachment is not the same as indifference. Detachment doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or disengaged from life. Rather, it's the ability to care without being controlled by external outcomes. It's a healthy form of emotional independence that allows us to live authentically, free from the pressure of others' expectations. Carl Jung's concept of individuation provides a perfect framework for understanding detachment. Jung believed that when we go through the process of individuation, we become more in tune with our true selves, less reliant on external validation, and more grounded in our own values. We stop letting other people's opinions define who we are. Instead, we become whole and self-contained. Eric Berne, in his book Games People Play, explores the concept of games that people play in relationships. These games are often based on the need for approval or the desire for power. Genuine detachment, according to Montaigne, is the ability to step out of these games and interact authentically. It's about engaging with the world from a place of inner strength, not from a place of seeking approval. Burns quote, "Awareness requires living in the here and now, and not in the elsewhere, the past or the future," speaks directly to the essence of detachment. When we are detached, we live fully in the present moment, free from the distractions of seeking external validation or approval. This type of detachment allows us to be more present, more engaged, and ultimately more fulfilled in our interactions with others. The key takeaway here is that detachment is not about withdrawing from life or becoming indifferent to others. It's about caring deeply without being controlled by the need for approval. When we practice detachment, we free ourselves from the tyranny of public opinion and can live more authentically and peacefully. The great illusion of control. Have you ever felt like you were trying to control every aspect of your life, only to realize that some things are completely beyond your influence? This is the illusion of control, a cognitive bias that causes us to overestimate our ability to control random or external events. It's a trap we often fall into, believing that we can manipulate every outcome, from our relationships to our career success. But as Montaigne would argue, true freedom comes from letting go of this illusion and embracing uncertainty. In the field of cognitive neuroscience, the illusion of control is a well-documented phenomenon. Studies show that people often believe they have more control over random events than they actually do. This overestimation of our influence leads to unnecessary anxiety and stress. We try to control every detail of our lives, yet the more we try, the more we become stressed and dissatisfied. This is where Montaigne's wisdom comes into play. He encourages us to embrace uncertainty and surrender to life as it unfolds, rather than desperately trying to control every outcome. R.D. Lang, in his book The Divided Self, explores how much of our psychological distress comes from trying to control things that are inherently uncontrollable, both within ourselves and in the external world. Lang's quote, "We live in a moment of history where change is so speeded up that we begin to see the present only when it is already disappearing," speaks to the futility of trying to grasp control over every fleeting moment. Change is inevitable, and no amount of effort can stop it. The only way to find peace is to let go of the need for control and accept life's natural ebb and flow. The takeaway here is profound. Releasing the illusion of control is not a sign of weakness but an act of strength. It's a recognition that we are not in charge of everything, and that's okay. When we stop trying to control every outcome, we can finally experience the freedom and peace that Montaigne spoke about. The paradox of not caring. It's fascinating how Montaigne's philosophy flips our usual thinking on its head. On the surface, the idea of not caring might seem like an invitation to arrogance, narcissism, or indifference. After all, when we hear the phrase not caring, we often think of someone who is callous or detached from the world. But Montaigne wasn't advocating for apathy. In fact, his message was much deeper and more nuanced. True detachment, the kind Montaigne championed, is not about rejecting the world or the people in it. It's about living authentically without being enslaved by others' opinions. When we stop caring about what others think of us, it can be mistaken for narcissism or even psychopathy. But there's an essential difference. Narcissists crave validation. They need constant admiration and approval. They seek to manipulate the world to reinforce their self-image. True detachment, on the other hand, doesn't seek validation at all. It is the freedom to exist without being defined by others. Montaigne's message is one of humility, not arrogance. It is about finding inner peace without the need for external confirmation. This idea of freedom from external approval is mirrored in the figure of the trickster. Lewis Hyde, in his book Trickster Makes This World, explores the role of the trickster in various cultures. The trickster is an archetype that challenges social norms and conventions by not caring about societal approval. The trickster's strength comes not from fitting in, but from being willing to break away from the constraints imposed by others. They embody the power of nonconformity and the creativity that arises when we release the need for external validation. Hyde writes, "Tricksters transform the mundane into the extraordinary through the willingness to break from convention." This idea ties perfectly into Montaigne's philosophy. When we stop chasing approval, we no longer live in the confines of societal norms. Instead, we open ourselves to true creativity, authenticity, and innovation. By not caring about what others think, we can embrace our true selves and discover untapped potential. The paradox here is profound. The more you stop caring about external validation, the more you become authentically yourself. And ironically, the more respect you often command from others, because people are drawn to those who are genuine and unafraid to be themselves. This is the power of detachment. It allows us to live freely, creatively, and authentically, without being weighed down by the need to conform. The freed mind. What does it really mean to be free? We often think of freedom in terms of external circumstances, freedom from rules, freedom from constraints. But true freedom, Montaigne believed, is internal. It is the ability to free our minds from the constraints of external validation, judgment, and expectations. When we stop caring about what others think, we reclaim our mental freedom. Neurologically, this freedom is rooted in the way our brains work. Studies in neuroscience have shown that when we are not burdened by the need for external validation, our brains are more efficient in decision-making. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for self-regulation and higher-order thinking, functions better when we are not consumed by worries about how others perceive us. This is why people who are mentally free tend to be better at making clear, authentic decisions. David K. Reynolds, in his book Constructive Living, discusses the importance of accepting what we can't control and taking responsibility for our own lives. This philosophy aligns perfectly with Montaigne's message. True freedom comes from accepting life as it is, rather than constantly trying to control the outcomes. Reynolds blends Japanese Morita therapy, which emphasizes focusing on actions rather than emotions, with therapy, which encourages reflection on one's life. Both therapies stress the importance of internal freedom and detachment from the need for external validation. Reynolds' insight: feelings are not controllable by direct will, but behavior can be, echoes Montaigne's call for us to live authentically, regardless of how others might judge us. We can't always control our emotions or how we feel about ourselves, but we can control our behavior and our response to external circumstances. When we stop seeking approval, we take full responsibility for our own lives, and in doing so, we unlock a deeper sense of peace and clarity. This mental freedom is not about turning off our emotions or shutting ourselves off from the world. It's about developing the strength to respond to the world on our own terms, rather than reacting to the judgments or expectations of others. True freedom comes when we stop looking for validation outside ourselves and start finding it within. The power of authenticity. Have you ever noticed how children naturally live in a state of authenticity? They say what's on their minds, express their feelings openly, and are completely free from the constraints of social expectations. But as we grow older, we begin to learn the rules of society, and we start tailoring our behavior to gain approval. The need to be liked and accepted can become so ingrained that we lose touch with our true selves. Daniel Goleman, in his book Emotional Intelligence, explores how authentic living is a crucial component of emotional intelligence. Authenticity, he argues, is key to building self-awareness, self-regulation, and empathy, three core components of emotional intelligence. When we live authentically, we are more in tune with our own feelings and motivations, which allows us to form deeper, more meaningful relationships with others. Albert J. Bernstein, in his book Emotional Vampires, delves into the impact of approval seeking on our relationships. He explains how people who constantly crave approval are often exploited by others, who feed off their neediness. These individuals can become emotional vampires, draining the energy of those around them. The best defense against such manipulation, Bernstein suggests, is authenticity. When we stop trying to please others and start living according to our own values, we disarm the emotional vampires in our lives. Bernstein's powerful quote, "Authenticity is our natural state, lost only when we buy into others' judgments," highlights the idea that we are born authentic, but as we grow, we are conditioned to seek approval. The journey back to authenticity is not about becoming someone else. It's about reconnecting with a person we always were before the world taught us to seek validation. Authenticity is a form of emotional intelligence. It allows us to be true to ourselves, even in the face of social pressure. When we stop caring about what others think, we become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of forming genuine connections. This is the power of authenticity. It protects us from manipulation, fosters deeper relationships, and ultimately leads us to a more fulfilling life. The flow state, from control to alignment. Imagine a state where you are completely absorbed in an activity, where time seems to disappear and you are fully engaged in the present moment. This is the flow state, a concept popularized by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. In this state, we are neither worried about approval nor distracted by fear of judgment. We are completely immersed in the task at hand, and the outcome becomes less important than the experience itself. Csikszentmihalyi describes flow as the optimal state of experience, one that leads to peak performance and deep satisfaction. When we are in flow, we stop worrying about how others perceive us, and we focus solely on the joy of the activity itself. This is the essence of Montaigne's philosophy. When we stop caring about external validation, we open ourselves to flow. Robert Keegan, in and Over Our Heads, discusses the challenges of modern life and the complexities of the world we live in. Keegan suggests that true growth requires us to step beyond our anxieties about social acceptance and align with our own values. Flow, he argues, is a natural outcome of this alignment. When we let go of the pressure to conform and embrace our true selves, we can enter a state of flow where we perform at our best. Keegan's quote, "Growth demands a temporary surrender of security," echoes Montaigne's call for us to embrace uncertainty and let go of the need for approval. Only by surrendering our need for external validation can we experience true growth and creativity. The takeaway here is simple. Flow emerges when we stop worrying about how others perceive us and immerse ourselves in the activity. The more we let go of external expectations, the more we align with our true selves, and the more effortlessly we enter the flow state. Embracing imperfection. In a society that often glorifies perfection, it's no surprise that we are constantly chasing an idealized version of ourselves. Perfectionism has become a badge of honor for many, but the psychological cost is high. Perfectionists often struggle with anxiety, stress, and a sense of inadequacy, no matter how much they achieve. This constant striving for flawlessness leads to a cycle of self-criticism and fear of failure, leaving little room for self-compassion or acceptance. The pressure to be perfect is not just a modern-day phenomenon. It has roots in ancient philosophy as well. The Greek philosopher Aristotle spoke about the idea of achieving eudaimonia, or flourishing, but he emphasized that this was not about being perfect. It was about living authentically and finding balance. Perfectionism, in contrast, is an unrealistic expectation that leads to a sense of never being enough. In Neurosis and Human Growth, Karen Horney highlights how the tyranny of the should creates neurosis. These are the internal demands we place on ourselves, the constant belief that we should be better, do more, or be more. When we constantly chase perfection, we are never content with who we are. We're trapped in a cycle of self-criticism and self-doubt, and this only intensifies our need for external validation. Horney argues that letting go of these shoulds is essential for emotional well-being. When we stop judging ourselves against an unattainable standard, we can finally experience peace. One of the most profound insights from Horney's work is that the search for glory and perfection is actually a search for an idealized self that cannot exist. As she puts it, the search for glory is in fact the search for an idealized self that can never exist. This idealized self is a fantasy, a version of ourselves that we create in our minds, based on society's standards or the expectations of others. But the reality is that this ideal self is unattainable. Perfection is a mirage, always just out of reach. When we let go of the pursuit of perfection, we embrace our true selves, flaws, imperfections, and all. This is the essence of Montaigne's philosophy. By accepting our imperfections, we open ourselves to growth and self-compassion. Imperfection is not something to fear or avoid. It is what makes us human. It is through embracing our flaws that we find our true strength. The key takeaway here is that perfectionism only leads to inner conflict and dissatisfaction. The path to true freedom and peace lies in accepting our imperfections. By letting go of the shoulds and the need for validation, we can cultivate self-compassion and emotional resilience. Imperfection is not a weakness. It is a source of strength, authenticity, and personal growth. Real courage. Living without permission. When we talk about courage, we often think of grand acts of heroism, facing danger, standing up to authority, or fighting for a cause. But real courage, Montaigne believed, is the courage to live authentically, without seeking permission from others. It's the courage to be yourself, even when society pressures you to conform, to step outside the norms, and to live according to your own values. This is the essence of Montaigne's philosophy. Living freely, without waiting for approval. Rollo May, in his book The Courage to Create, argues that courage is the foundation of all virtue. He suggests that the courage to create, the courage to be oneself, and the courage to face existential anxiety without running to external validation are the keys to a meaningful life. This courage is not about avoiding fear. It's about acknowledging fear and moving forward anyway. K. Redfield Jamison, in An Unquiet Mind, explores how embracing vulnerability and living out loud can be a source of strength. While her book focuses on bipolar disorder, her reflections on embracing the full spectrum of human experience, joy, sadness, chaos, and peace, parallel Montaigne's call to live authentically, regardless of societal judgment. Jamison writes, "We all build internal seawalls to keep at bay the sadnesses of life and the often overwhelming forces within our minds. These walls are our defense mechanisms, built to protect us from vulnerability and judgment. But true courage comes from letting go of these walls and confronting life as it is, without fear, without external approval, and without the need to control every aspect of our lives." The lesson here is that real courage is not about waiting for permission to live your truth. It's about choosing authenticity over approval. It's about stepping into the world as your true self, knowing that living without permission is the path to true freedom. It requires the courage to face the discomfort of being judged, to confront the anxiety of uncertainty, and to trust that the only approval you need is your own. Connecting the dots. In Montaigne's view, true freedom is not found in chasing external validation or trying to force life to conform to our desires. It is found in letting go, the willingness to release our attachment to approval and embrace life as it unfolds. This shift from external obsession to internal peace is the key to living authentically. When we stop seeking validation from the outside world, we begin to align with our true selves, and life starts to flow with greater ease and purpose. The journey toward freedom begins with small, conscious steps. You can start by practicing micro-detachments, moments where you deliberately stop caring about what others think. For example, try not checking your social media likes for a day, or resist the urge to constantly seek others' approval. These small acts of detachment allow you to reclaim your personal power and free yourself from the grip of external validation. Another powerful tool is cognitive reframing. Every time you catch yourself craving approval or validation, remind yourself, their validation doesn't define me. This simple shift in perspective can help break the cycle of approval seeking and allow you to rediscover your authentic self. Mindfulness practices, such as journaling or meditation, can also help you track your progress and observe how your sense of peace grows as you release the need for external striving. These practices help you stay grounded in the present moment, where true peace resides. The ultimate transformation happens when you realize that the most profound changes take place not in the external hustle, but in the internal surrender. When you stop caring about the wrong things, the approval of others, the need to fit in, the pressure to be perfect, you can start caring about the right things, your own growth, authenticity, and inner peace. By embracing Montaigne's philosophy, you can unlock the freedom to live life on your own terms. This is the true essence of personal growth, letting go of external validation and stepping into the fullness of your own being. When you stop caring about what others think, everything begins to fall into place. You are free to be who you truly are, without the chains of approval, fear, or judgment. And that freedom, above all else, is the key to a life of deep fulfillment.